State authorization has been making headlines lately, and it's not always clear from a single bit of news or a press release why that should be the case. Today, I'll present a brief explanation of state authorization, as well as the current state of play. There are three parts to the authorization of post-secondary institutions to operate in the U.S. The first is a measure of quality assurance, which is generally handled through institutional accreditation by one of 6 regional or many national accrediting organizations. The second part involves assurance of the financial integrity of an institution, generally handled by the federal government. Institutions must meet this authorization requirement to qualify to accept students' federal financial aid dollars. The third part of authorization is assurance of consumer protection. This is generally considered to be a state role, with each state taking responsibility for ensuring consumer protection against fraudulent practices of any institution located within the state. However, both in the institutions they review or exempt from review and the criteria and procedures they employ, the authorization requirements for institutions are highly variable across the states. Some have very stringent requirements, while others have almost none. This is especially troubling given the enormous growth of distance education. Many institutions offer at least some distance education courses, which, if taken by students outside of the institution's home state, require the institution to meet multiple authorization requirements in multiple states. As a result, many institutions have chosen to limit their distance education offerings to students in a limited number of states. This in turn limits student access, interfering with the promise of anytime, anywhere distance education. What keeps institutions from becoming authorized in all 50 states? First, some states require institutions to pay significant fees to cover the cost of state review. Such fees and required surety bonds may be especially problematic for smaller institutions with fewer resources. Secondly, the state authorization role sometimes overlaps significantly with the accreditor's role of assuring academic quality and the federal government's role of assuring financial integrity. Institutions are thus subject to redundant requirements. Third, since requirements are highly variable across states, the authorization landscape has become very complex. Some states require involved processes, many forms, and high fees, while others require little from the institution. Finally, physical presence. While it may not be quite as difficult as determining the presence of a spirit at a seance, it can be quite complicated for institutions to determine whether they meet the physical presence requirements in different states. In the past few years, the federal government has called attention to this complexity by passing Rule 600.9, which requires institutions to assure they comply with state laws. Part C of the federal rule dealt directly with distance education. However, this portion was struck down on procedural grounds. When appealed by the feds, it was struck down again by the courts. The other 2 parts of the rule, however, still stand. In the latest interpretation of these portions, the feds have indicated that accreditation suffices as a measure of quality control, but only for institutions chartered by the state, and not for other institutions. One way out of the current mess, envisioned by multiple players in the field, is to ensure consistency in authorization requirements across all U.S. states through reciprocity agreements. In the past year and a half, the Commission for the Regulation of Post-Secondary Distance Education has worked to bring together diverse parties, states, accreditors, national associations, institutions, regional compacts, and distance education providers around a common agenda. The final report of the Commission, released this April, outlined recommendations for a State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement, or SARA, around 3 areas: academic quality, financial integrity, and consumer protection. The Commission's report was presented to a packed symposium of representatives from 47 states. It was more packed than that. On April 16th and 17th of this year. The information was generally well received, with many states eager to begin the process of implementation. The work of SARA implementation now rests with the regional compacts, WICHE, NEBI, MEC, and SREB. These compacts will broker implementation for the states within their region and work across regions in a national coordinating body. I hope that the issues and movement around state authorization make more sense to you now. I'd also like to direct you to the SHEEO survey webpage, where we maintain a collection of authorization information from each of the state agencies. Thank you.